When I was 6 years old, I made this piece of art. It was a school project. We were given magazines and glue sticks to collage with, and Crayola markers and colored pencils to add drawn elements to our piece. And as far as I can remember, we pretty much had free rein as far as the subject matter and the style. By the way, throughout this video, I'll be playing a time-lapse I filmed a few weeks ago of me making a drawing that was inspired by this piece I made in first grade. It's mostly just so you have something to look at while I'm talking, but it's also a little relevant because making that drawing is what gave me the idea for this video in the first place. Anyway, I remember my teacher praising this piece while I was working on it. Then I decided at the last minute that I wanted to color the background in black. This was a risky choice because I wasn't sure if the black marker had enough ink in it, but luck was on my side that day and I finished up my piece feeling really proud of myself. And then I showed my teacher and she told me I shouldn't have colored in the background black, that it was too much. I remember that phrase specifically, too much. She said it looked better before. That was the first time I can remember feeling ashamed of my art. From the outside, it wasn't a huge moment. I doubt my teacher even knew I was upset. But on the inside, I was humiliated. I simply hadn't known until that point in my life that it was possible to do a bad job at making art. I felt caught off guard, like I'd broken a rule I didn't even know existed. To be super clear, this is not a video intended to hate on my first grade teacher. I know her comment wasn't intended to make me feel bad about myself or to discourage me from taking creative risks. On the whole, she was a supportive and encouraging teacher, and I don't blame her for making one critical comment about my art that, for whatever reason, has stuck with me for 24 years. Her comment and this specific incident is not really what this video is about. I'm not trying to psychoanalyze her behavior or anything. What I do want to do is use this experience, this story of what happened in this small, specific moment, to have a conversation about the common belief that bad art exists. This belief that art can be objectively judged as being good or bad, better or worse, is what led my teacher to try to impart a correct sense of aesthetics onto a 6-year-old child. Which, that's weird when you really take a look at it, right? I mean, I was 6 years old. I wasn't a professional artist or even an aspiring art student. It makes sense for a teacher to correct a child's behavior if there's an educational reason to do so. If she had been correcting me on how to spell a word, that would be totally reasonable. But all I was doing here was making artistic choices that she thought were bad. Not even like the proportions on the face being incorrect, which would still be an insane thing to say to a 6-year-old, but would at least be rooted in an objective concept, i.e. the anatomy of the human face. She just thought it was better before I colored in the background. Better. What does that mean? Art is subjective, right? There is no objective way to determine good versus bad art. So what exactly was she even correcting me on? To dig into this question, let's first take a step back and get familiar with the art piece itself. As I said, it's a mixed media piece, primarily collage and marker with a bit of colored pencil, and I believe it was made in late 2000 or early 2001. I'll walk you through the various aspects of this piece one at a time because there's a lot to look at. First off, the subject of this piece is a giant head floating in water. The head is made of multicolored geometric shapes. It has a rainbow for a nose and a cat centipede for a mouth. It's wearing a pair of sunglasses too, one lens of which features a goldfish that's wearing its own pair of glasses, and the other lens a chimpanzee who's either singing or speaking into a microphone. This giant head is also wearing a canoe as a hat, with 8 orange figures riding in the canoe. I think they're gummy bears. There are dandelions sticking out of the head to represent hair, and on the right side of the face there's a small book sticking out like an ear, and it's titled A Nice Book. To give you an idea of what the piece looked like before I added the black background, I'll put an edited image on screen here. This is the version that my teacher said was better. This is the one she said was worse. What baffles me about this moment when I think about it today is like, what the hell was she talking about? I mean, these are both amazing drawings. The subject matter is super creative. We have a ton of details that pull you right into the piece, make you want to spend more time with it. On a technical level, the drawn elements of the piece are even rendered with enough skill that I can still tell what they were supposed to be, despite the fact that I was 6 years old when I made this. Honestly, this piece of art fucking rules. And while I can understand someone having a personal preference for one version over the other, I wouldn't say either of them is more well-made than the other. My point is, there's not an objectively better or worse version between these two pieces. And yet my teacher felt confident enough in her belief that one version was better than the other that she decided to tell me it like it was a fact. Like she was teaching me the answer to a math problem. 2 + 2 is 4, and it's bad to draw a black background in this piece. I think a lot of people have had a moment like this, or multiple moments in their lives, where they picked up the idea that there's a right and wrong way to make art. For some people, that moment was the last time they ever made art, and that really sucks. For me, I kept making art, but the shame of that moment stayed with me, and I began to believe that it was possible to make art wrong. And this idea, this belief, was reinforced over and over again throughout my life as different friends and teachers commented on my art and expressed their opinions about whether it was good or bad. My time in art school as an undergrad also ended up reinforcing this belief, which I'll talk about more later on. So what do we mean when we call art bad, or when we say one piece is better than the other? There are 2 main situations where I tend to see people calling art bad. The first situation is when someone considers an art piece to be morally wrong. It's a piece of art that's used to hurt people, like propaganda or hate speech, and that makes it bad. It shouldn't be allowed to exist based on moral grounds. That's the argument. And I can understand where this argument is coming from, right? Because obviously art can be, and frequently is, used to hurt people, and that harm is very real. But the way I see it is, the art itself is not what's bad in these situations. The way it's being used to hurt people is bad. The art is just art. It's pencil marks on a page, dabs of paint on a canvas, words arranged into sentences. It's a neutral object that just exists. And within a specific social and cultural context, this object can be used to harm people. But that, the people doing harm to each other part, is what's bad. The art is not inherently bad. Even art that's been used to hurt people in the past can be used in other contexts to educate people and attempt to prevent harm in the future. In my opinion, and to be clear, this is my opinion, you don't have to agree with me, many people do not. In my opinion, there's no possible way for an art object in and of itself to be morally bad. There's no moral reason to demand the censorship or destruction of a piece of art. I do think it's important to be careful about how we use art to interact with other people, but that's a matter of human behavior, not a judgment on the inherent moral value of an art object. So if we take away the idea that art can be bad for moral reasons, the other reason I see people calling art bad is if it's doing a bad job at whatever it's supposed to be doing. In other words, if it's not adequately performing its function. So you may ask, what is the function of art? Well, art can serve a lot of different functions, and it's kind of up to the artist and the art consumer to decide what those functions are and how well the art piece is serving those functions. And this is where we get back to my art school professors and the topic of art criticism, which I think can be a really useful tool for artists. I went to the University of Washington and I got my Bachelor of Arts degree in painting and drawing. My professors had a specific job, which was to teach students art skills. But what those skills were was sort of informed by this underlying assumption that we're there to become professional artists. Being a professional artist typically means making art that people want to pay money for, so you can make a living and feed yourself and all that stuff. Because money is a limited resource, people tend to be more motivated to pay money for art when it provides value to them. And there are a million different reasons why any given person might find value in a piece of art and decide to pay money for it, but some reasons are a lot more common than others. One common reason a lot of people find value in certain art pieces is because it brings them aesthetic pleasure, or in other words, it's pretty. A lot of art serves this purpose of looking beautiful, of providing a pleasing visual experience to the viewer. And there are certain tools an artist can learn to use, like perspective, harmonious color, balanced composition, realistic anatomy, that can be used in an art piece to make it so more people consider this piece visually pleasing to look at. Another reason people find value in art could be it conveys meaning. This could be a portrait of a loved one, a tattoo that symbolizes an important personal belief, or a dance performance that conveys an emotion. Learning to make art that conveys meaning is honestly kind of tricky to teach, because the most effective way to convey meaning in a piece is going to be different based on what meaning you're trying to convey and who you're conveying it to. But it is something that our professors did focus on teaching us quite a lot. People also value art that's entertaining, like movies and TV shows and music. Some art schools focus more on this entertainment-specific genre of art, whereas my school was more geared toward capital F fine art, the stuff you'd find in an art gallery or a museum. So learning to make entertaining art wasn't part of my education, but it's definitely something that can be taught. I just don't personally know what those lessons usually are. And these are just a few examples, right? There are so many more functions that art can serve, like being thought-provoking, advertising a product, or normalizing a political ideology. Or even really weird reasons, like maybe you want a statue on your nightstand to use as a makeshift weapon, and you really couldn't care less what it looks like or symbolizes. Or maybe you're really forgetful, so you want a big blanket tapestry that physically blocks you from leaving your room until you grab your keys. And you don't care about the personal meaning in the piece as long as it's really big and gets in your way. Of course, art schools don't tend to teach people to make art for the function of being really big and getting in the way, because most people don't value that. And we're aiming for what the majority of people value, because that's, in theory, how you get enough money to pay your rent. So, okay, if you're trying to create art that serves a specific function, then yes, the art can be better or worse at serving that function. And that's essentially what art critique is for, to help an artist make their art as effective as possible at serving its intended function. But if your art doesn't serve its intended function as effectively as possible, or if it's maybe not even effective at all, does that make it bad art? I don't think so. I think it still has the potential to provide value to someone for maybe a different reason than you originally intended. There's huge educational value in making art that isn't successful too. That's how you learn to create art that's more successful. And a quote-unquote failed art piece could have personal value later on as a meaningful reminder of how far you've come as an artist. Or maybe you never bother to get more skilled and you just enjoy making amateur art. That totally has value too. I love to sing and play guitar, and I don't intend to ever try to get good at it, but it brings me a lot of value in the form of joy and emotional self-expression. What I'm saying is, just because there's a way to judge whether a piece of art is more or less effective at fulfilling its purpose, doesn't mean that level of effectiveness determines the inherent value of the art itself. Again, it's not about the art object being bad or good. The art is just a neutral object made of paper or paint or clay or fabric or dance movements. So what's my point? My point is that I believe there's really no such thing as bad art, even though a lot of people think there is. I used to think so too, because it's what people like my first grade teacher taught me. It's what my art school professors taught me too. And it's a belief that I've spent a lot of time unlearning over the past 10 years since I finished art school. It's a belief that's really hurt me and my relationship to art. It's made it difficult, even impossible at times, to make any creative work at all. And that means it's not a belief that's serving me. I got caught in this mental trap of feeling like I have to make art that's good or else people won't buy it. But then that made me too afraid to make bad art, so I didn't make any art at all, which meant nobody could buy my art. Maybe this kind of motivation works for some people, but it's just not a mindset I've found to be personally helpful as I work toward my goals in life. I'm still working on unlearning this bad art belief, but hearing other people share similar views has been one way that I help reinforce this mindset shift, and that's actually the entire reason I started making YouTube videos, because I want to be one of those voices that could help someone else who's trying to unlearn these beliefs and heal their own relationship with art and creativity. I know so many people who feel like they shouldn't make art because they're worried it will be bad. And that anxiety doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from a lifetime of other people reinforcing these beliefs in you, whether they intended to or not. That's why I'm making this video, to hopefully challenge those beliefs and at least present an alternative view for how to approach art and creative work. I know I'm not the only person in the world, or even on YouTube, to be sharing this belief. But I think even if everything I'm saying has been said before, it's still worth repeating. Sometimes it just takes hearing a different person say the same thing in order for it to sink in. That's about it for what I have to say today, but I hope we can continue this conversation in the comments because I'm really interested to hear what you all think. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more videos of me talking about art and or making art, you can subscribe to my channel. Have a great day, stay safe out there, and if you feel like it, maybe make some art.